What's up, Liron here. This is part 2 of my 2 video series. In this one, I'm going to show you how to do the same thing, so translate a photo, this time from black and white to color, and how to match the value properly. And we're going to do this pretty much alla prima, meaning in one go. I want to apologize because my throat aches a little and my voice is a little lower than usual, but you'll have to forgive me for that, and let's get started with the process. So this time I don't show you the drawing process because you can go back to Thursday video and see it. It's the very same drawing, but this time I'm going to show you how to translate the black and white into color. We're going to do this pretty much alla prima, so no real need to do too many glazes, just a couple of details maybe. And I'm going to start with a mid value. By the way, I want to apologize about my voice. It's a little hoarse. I have a throat ache and it's a little deeper than usual, but we're going to have to deal with it. So I'm going to start here with quite, this is too wet actually. I'm going to get a bit of less water. And I'm just filling in this kind of a mid value. Okay, it seems like, to me at least, the crown starts here with a bit of a mid value, and all I'm doing is really avoiding the highlight. So all of this, and I actually missed one, that can happen really right at the beginning. So I'm going to bring it back and then paint around it a little more carefully. Now, the main principle you wanna pay attention to is to match the value of the color to the black and white value. And I'm actually gonna show you what I mean by that. I'm gonna have probably, hopefully, a kind of a diagram here. But in any case, any color you try, I did it again. It's a little confusing while talking, sorry about that. But in any case, any color you mix, you wanna make sure that it matches the value of the original reference. So now I'm gonna strengthen this just a little bit because it does get darker the more it goes to the right. Now again, remember, with watercolor you can fix mistakes later on, so nothing's really the end of the world. You just have to make sure not to go way too dark, because that'll be a problem. So now let's switch it up. Let's use a bit of maybe yellow. There's this new gamboge hiding under all of this dirt here. Let's just kind of let those two blend together. There is this shadow right here. I'm gonna place this kind of beautiful, it turned out to a beautiful orange. So I'm gonna do that. Here we have another shadow. And then these are all in the shadow, except for maybe small highlights, like so. And that's pretty much it with the crown. Now I wanna show you something. I'm gonna bring a diagram. So nothing too complex, but what I have here basically is just a couple of different values on paper, and then what you can do is try and match them and see right next to one another if they're close, or if one of them seems to be significantly darker than the other. For example, no matter how much red I'm gonna get here, this black is still gonna be a little darker. But then you can add some water and properly match it with the value that you have here. And it just can help to have this kind of thing on the side. So now let's move on with the process. Now I'm gonna need a bit of a darker paint here, because that's one of the heaviest shadows. I'm just gonna put it in, and it goes kind of like this. I'm not gonna worry too much about touching the previous section, because what I'm doing here is alla prima. I understand it may be a little messy and a little blended together, so I'm just grabbing a bit of paint here. Now I do see some reflected light, so I'm gonna just put a bit of yellow here and turn this into kind of a beautiful green. And this entire section is in the shadow, so just like the previous time, I'm gonna continue it like that. Grab a lot of paint and just cover this whole thing up. And again, the more details we add, the more values we add, the better understanding you'll have for the entire context of the scene. The bottom of the nose actually has some reflected light, so I'm going to try and pick up a bit of a pure yellow. But anyway, what I was saying is that the more values you add and the more mid values, shadows, etc., the better understanding you'll have of the scene. So once you put in the really darks, the context for what you're looking at improves. Now I'm going to do a bit of wet and wet here, because I need this section to be really dark, so that goes like this. While this area is still dark, I can rework it. There's a strong shadow under here, under the eye socket. There's a bit of a shadow under the eye here. then another one indicating the cheekbone. You want to make sure you put in all of those details. Now on with this left section, and I think now we can switch our blue to something else. So maybe let's go back to some orange here near the mouth and the bottom. We have a bit of orange, and again, it doesn't matter what color I pick up, but it does matter the value. And that's the main thing I'm concerned with, okay? This entire thing is in the shadow. There is a small highlight here. This is really important. You paint around that, like so. You paint around this rounded highlight, and notice how blunt I am in terms of accuracy. You don't really have to be that accurate for it to look good. Let's put a bit of red here, I don't know, just because I feel like it. And a shape will slowly come to develop, okay? No matter what you do, no matter how much you quote-unquote mess it up, or it's, you know, not as graceful as you think you need it to be, that doesn't really matter. Sorry about my lame speaking skills today. I don't know, my throat hurts and it's just a little annoying. Now I'm gonna use a bit of both the yellow. I want to do this shadow again. It's reflected light from the bottom, so using quite a lot of yellow here. By the way, I still need to complete this section that I kind of haven't gotten to work on. You can use the spray gun just to add some time to work on it and improve it. But in any case, as dark a yellow as I can, then switch maybe to a bit of orange. And finally, let's add a bit of blue here. And cover this whole section up, and we're pretty much done with that. You do want to get in some of these details. Next up, we have this area. I still haven't finished with that. Let's do some green here. It looks beautiful. So a bit more green to this shadow. And again, I look at the reference and it's dark, and then I put in the dark paint, okay? Now, one more thing you want to pay attention to, and I'm constantly touching my painting accidentally. One thing that's really, I think, important and you want to pay attention to is the relations of values. Meaning, if you look at this cheek and it looks super dark, look at something that's a little darker, like the shadow here, and it will help you realize that maybe it's not as dark as you thought, okay? Mid values can be really tricky, and it's easy to mess them up. It's easy to misjudge the value, and this is one way of avoiding that, okay? So just kind of comparing it to something else that's there, and that'll help you get a better context for the scene. This should be a bit of a shadow on the upper lip and the mouth, a bit of shadow here, a bit of it there, and now we pretty much got the idea of what this area of the face looks like. This is quite strong, that's fine, a bit of a shadow down here, and this area kind of is left in the shadow. The beautiful part about shadows is that because they're so dark, they can kind of be left to their own devices. You don't have to worry too much about them. Now I'm going to switch to a bit of a different blue. Let's grab this kind of cerulean-ish blue here, and I'm going to put this kind of shadow with this blue. This is a blue that can't get too dark, but that's fine. Now notice how all of the lower the parts facing upwards are a bit blue, but then the parts facing downwards are orange. Okay, so I'm going to add a bit of that orange here. The reason why is, again, reflected light from the ground. Okay, I'm going to leave that highlight. So now we have a beautiful combination of warm and cool colors here. That'll really help the impression. Now I'll start warming it up and lightening it up here around this section. Shouldn't be too dark, but you also don't want to have too much water on your brush because that'll hurt your control. So whenever you have too much water, simply dab it on, I'm just gonna get rid of some of that. Simply dab it on a towel and get rid of it. You don't need, even when you're using lighter values, you don't really need too much water. So now I have a lot of water on the brush. I'm gonna show you. I don't have much control. I'm just dabbing it on a paper towel or whatever, and then I'm moving on, and it works really well. So this is this section, kind of the shadow under it, and slowly but surely you start to gain an understanding of what's up with this kind of scene. I'm going to do these really impressionistically. Not going to worry too much about it. But I will do some, let's say, French ultramarine blue here in the shadows. And notice how beautiful it is. I have tons of colors throughout this painting, and it still works really nicely. Let's darken it up a bit. It works really nicely because the values are on point, and that's pretty much the only thing that really matters. Okay, now I'm gonna put in a mid value, and I feel like this one's lacking a bit of yellows and warm colors, so we're gonna do that for the mid value. And I need to keep this quite light, and it's gonna accompany this section. Okay, you've seen me do this in the previous example as well. This section has to be just ever so slightly darker. Okay, so here we go, darkening that, and this mid value will help us figuring out the context of the rest of the face. So now that we have a mid value, not just this super dark transition here, maybe even add a bit of blue to the nose, it's much more fun. I think it looks better. Now I forgot to do some wet and wet here, so I don't know if it's still wet. Looks like it is still wet. So I'm going to put these kinds of shadows here for the eye. And this is pretty much it. And notice how beautiful, colorful, fun this is. I'm going to add a bit of yellow to the lower sections here. They also have, this has a bit of a shadow on it. This has a bit of a shadow on it. And all of these small details help you with slowly building the context for the face. So like that. Maybe a bit of a gradual transition here. Now I do want to add darker shadows here. That's important. Just be careful with that yellow. It's close, it's touching, but that's fine. If I would have tried to be more accurate, I would have been more careful here. And this is pretty much it. Now I want us to get to these areas that have heavy shadows. I'm going to switch to my smaller silver black velvet brush. And again, tools and materials are all going to be in the description box below, so you can look at that later. So a bit of blue here, actually a bit of orange. This is a bit warm for some reason, like so. Here we go. And then around the bottom, let's keep this the warm bias here. So we got this shadow in. Now you want to make sure you bring out the shape of this part using this shadow. We have a much darker shadow here. I'm going to put in like that. With this kind of shape, you have a much stronger shadow around here, kind of like this. This shadow gets all the way back here. Now you start to get a feeling of the light and shadow and the direction and everything. Strong shadow here, strong shadow here, a bit of a strong shadow here in this area. This should have a gentle shadow. This is at least what I see in the reference. Bit of a gentle shadow here. And I think this is pretty much it for the actual figure. I may be missing something here and there. Let me just take a quick look. What I'm doing is squinting my eyes and trying to figure out if there's an area where I messed up. So for example, I missed this spot here. That's important. I missed these areas here. Should be a little darker. For the different wedges, I missed a kind of a mid value here as well, around here, and actually also around here, because there is a beveled, kind of a curved shape to the crown. And what else? Yeah, I think this is pretty much it. Now let's get to work on the background. So now for the background, I do want to contrast it with what we've had so far. Very vibrant colors. In the original reference, it's quite green. So you have a couple of options. And by the way, I forgot to add, there's a nice shadow going on through here. You have a couple of options with the background. I could choose to have it just neutral, and that'll bring out the kind of colorful statue, or I can go for green, because green would also work here. So I'm really not sure. I think we won't go for green. Let's go for neutral. Neutral would make the actual statue pop more. And we can change the bias of that neutral. So right now I'm starting with a bit of red, maybe, like this. Maybe even a bit of a pure red. Then I'm going to switch to blue. it's gonna be super dark anyway, so yeah. And I do feel like if I'm gonna make it colorful, it's gonna ruin the, I think, the feeling of depth and interest, because if everything is colorful, then, you know, I'm gonna spray some water here just to keep this area fresh. I don't want to flip it right now because that'll be a bit too much of an effort to lift everything up, including the palette. So I'm going to be a little careful, but not too careful, as you can see. This way of doing things a little faster really comes from doing so many brush control exercises. You have to do these exercises if you want to be able to do the same thing. And this is really the fruits of a lot of practicing doing this. Okay, this didn't happen overnight. Being able to control the brush that way, and I'm still learning. There are a lot of times when the brush doesn't do what I expected it to do, and then I feel a little cocky and I feel like I was punished for it. So that can happen as well, but for the most part I can get it to do what I want, just because I practice this so much. Okay, so here we go, around the crown, around the top, like this, like that. A bit of, I think, yellow here, just to balance it out. There's plenty of other paints here. So a bit of yellow. Now this section should also be quite dark, so you want to make sure to darken it significantly. Not dark enough. Now it's getting there. A bit of the red. And now here it has to be really, really dark, because we have to contrast it with a part of the shadow that's already quite dark. But you know what? We can take some artistic liberties. Let's change it up. Let's do this area a little lighter. Let's have an opposite contrast in this side. Let's go for lighter. Like this. I actually am also tempted to leave this gap white here at the bottom. I don't know why. Feels like it frees the scene up. I'm actually gonna lift a bit of that, like this. I don't know why, but it just feels right to have this empty area there. I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. Just get to some of the details that I missed here. Like this. Here we go. I love these gaps here. They do the job really well. And I think with that we're done. So I'm gonna sign this one as always. I hope you enjoyed seeing this, and to me, seeing this kind of way of doing things for the very first time was really eye-opening, because I was so locked on colors in the beginning, and not even realistic colors, but like my colors, the colors I prefer to use, the colors I like, and I wouldn't try out different colors. But once I opened up my mind to it, it actually worked out, and it's similar to music in a sense, because when you have a scale, the song has to adhere to the scale, but when you have these chromatic scales that have all notes in them, and there's plenty of creations like this, Konski, I forgot how to spell my name for a moment, it works when you have all of the notes, okay? When you have all the notes, it actually works out well, but if you have some of them, it feels like you have to adhere to some kind of a scale. So the same kind of thing happens here. This has to be a little darker. When you use just a couple of paints, it may look odd, but when you're using all of them, it will look beautiful. And I used cerulean, phthalo, French ultramarine, this kind of strong red, orange, two kinds of yellows, and it still looks beautiful. So with that being said, now we can wrap up this video. So this is it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this one. I, for one, love the idea of matching the value with any random color you want. I get very bored of matching colors to the T. I don't like that, and I'm not good at it, quite frankly. I love to use whatever color I want freely, as long as I use the right value. So in any case, I hope you enjoyed seeing the process. Don't forget to give this video a like. If you missed the previous part that I published on Thursday, be sure to check that out. Same thing, only monochromatic. And also subscribe if this is my first video you encounter and you enjoy this. I would be happy to have you on board. And this is it for today. I will see you again in another vid real soon.